Hello, I'm Heather Holst-Knudsen, CEO of H2K Labs and your host of the Revenue Room podcast, where we talk about fueling enterprise value by leveraging data, digital, and AI. Before I kick off with our next guest, I'm excited to announce RevvedUP 2025. This will take place February 25th through the 27th in my beautiful hometown of Sarasota, Florida. RevvedUP 2025 is an invitation-only gathering and brain trust for CEOs and their revenue-critical C-suite teams leading multi-sided businesses in media, events, data information, marketplaces, and professional networks. I launched RevvedUP for a few reasons. The first one is I'm extremely passionate about empowering our industry to write the rules versus ceding business value to tech platforms. And with AI no longer an on the horizon situation, it's here to stay. And with threats abounding, it's time for us to turn those threats into opportunities and to establish the rules of the game versus being told what to do. The second reason is there's clearly a gap in the market when it comes for events for us as an industry, and I want to fill that gap. We need new faces in the room, we need future forward serious discussions, and we need cross-industry and cross-functional convergence. And most importantly, we need to take this discussion from 50,000 feet down to 10 and 5,000 feet. It's time for the conversation about data and its role in driving significant and sustainable enterprise value to take center stage. This discussion should leave you neither confused nor bored, but instead equip you and your teams with actionable strategies and playbooks to implement back at the office. It's about making existing revenue streams better, improving profitability, launching new revenue streams, and creating defensible competitive advantage. It's about CEOs helping CEOs learn how to navigate this increasingly complex race course. No one has all the answers, but together we can form them. So if you're a CEO or a C-suite leader interested in improving how your business is extracting maximum financial return from your most valuable asset data, then RevvedUP is for you. Visit h2klabs.com/RevvedUp with 2 V's to learn more. Okay, so with that, please join me in welcoming Matt Reilly, CEO of Fusable. Matt is a 3-time CEO who brings more than 25 years of experience in technology and business services to his current role as CEO of Fusable. Before that, he served as division CEO and one of the 4 named executive officers at a New York Stock Exchange listed company where he doubled the size of his division during his tenure. Prior to that, Matt spent 11 years in various senior executive roles at Accenture, led its North American consulting business, and played a key role in launching its digital services business. He also served as chief executive of one of their acquired firms. Matt began his career in the U.S. Navy as an engineering officer and department head. He currently serves on the board of advisors of Goizueta Business School at Emory University and has published thought leadership on a range of strategic topics in outlets such as Harvard Business Review, the Wall Street Journal, and Bloomberg Business Week. He has also co-led a year-long strategic initiative with the World Economic Forum on the Industrial Internet and has appeared on Fox Business News TV and CNN Radio. Welcome, Matt. I know I just introduced you, but I can imagine I just touched the surface. Is there anything I missed in your illustrious career that you'd like to share with the audience?
Wow, no, it's been, first of all, thanks for having me. This is going to be a great conversation, and I really enjoyed, the work that we've done together so far with the roundtable, and it was great to meet you. But no, I'm happy to jump right into the conversation. This is a topic near and dear to my heart, and we're spending a lot of time on this in the business in terms of, injecting artificial intelligence and machine learning into our data assets. So really looking forward to the discussion today.
Yeah, no, I am too. I was, just having operated in some of the industries you operate in at Fusable, seeing how you're taking, a media product, a media product that exists now, and then adding very, very sophisticated data and intelligence on it. And, the markets you serve is really exciting. So I'll start off my first question. So Fusable is a spin out from Randall Reilly, which is an established media entity. I think you mentioned 110 years old. But you now are a startup, and we'll get into the startup part in a second. But can you share like how this evolved, how the split happened, and how you've been navigating this transition and this new strategy?
Sure. So Randall Reilly is a really well-established brand in the trucking and transportation space. It's been around for a very, very long time, as you mentioned. And it had really gotten into the data business as a way to find more customers, more clients. They had acquired a data asset. EDA actually was the flagship asset decades ago. And as I mentioned, it was a way to find trucking companies. And so at one point, the leadership team realized, hey, this data thing really has a lot of intrinsic value itself. And so when I came aboard, our mission was really to pivot this part of the company fully into the data space. And so as we gained critical mass, we acquired new data assets from other companies. We consolidated our critical mass in this part of the business, including our digital business. It made more and more sense for us to focus solely on data and digital powered data. And so working with the board, we decided it made a lot more sense for us to go our own way. And so in May of this year, May 1st, actually, we fully launched as a separate legal entity, the business that we now call Fusable. And how that came about was, as we thought about branding, because a brand has to mean something, right? It has to have some intrinsic value. Some of our marketing team were in a meeting and they talked about, as we combine our data sets for clients to create more value, we're fusing this data together, and they kept using this word. And at some point, one of them said, well, the data is fusible. And just organically, that's how the brand happened, became Fusable. And so that's how the brand was born, if you will. So that's where the Fusable brand came from, because it was just sort of an organic thing that happened as we begin to combine our data sets to create more value. And, this was kind of the natural evolution of this company. And the Randall Reilly brand still exists, with our financial backers. And that's a great brand itself, but that's more associated with the talent business and the talent space. And so that made more sense to just be very focused on the thing that's their core, which is finding and attracting talent for their clients. And so we're now 100% focused on the data and digital business.
And with that, you still have media assets. I saw, like, you still have
Absolutely.
your publications or digital presence, and so you're basically able to leverage both sides. I mean, you're able to leverage both sides of this, the new data insights, but with these established brands that serve their communities with very, very important, decision support tools.
That's right, Heather. In fact, the on-platform assets are really an important part of our flywheel. If you think of, like, for example, Commercial Carrier Journal, or CCJ, it's sort of like the Wall Street Journal for the trucking industry. That's a really important asset. And we have a number of other assets like that. We have editors that do, award-winning content, and we have events and that sort of thing. And that's important for us to maintain a proprietary content, because it allows us to attract people to our sites and to our online assets. And from there, we can collect a lot of information. And that actually helps us with our clients, our large OEMs in the construction, ag, and trucking and transportation spaces. So when we help them grow and find new customers, we actually have a very updated and organically refreshing database, because we have these other assets that are out in the market creating new content. And every day they refresh themselves organically. So it's an important part of the flywheel strategy, where we're creating content. People come to this content to learn from our editors. And then we have our relationships with our OEMs and our dealers and distributors who want to find out, where should they go market, where should they go sell. And using our data and our first party assets, we can combine that in targeted ways to help them grow faster and make more money. So it's really part of our strategy, part of the flywheel.
No, it's the 2 + 2 = 10 equation.
Mm-hmm.
You describe Fusable as a 110-year-old startup. And listen, I came from a 125-year-old family-owned business, so I get the whole, it's an old, it's legacy, but you're trying very hard and you have to constantly reinvent yourself. It's challenging though, right? Because there's culture, and this is the way we do it. But you're starting fresh, but you still have that 110-year-old part of it. It's not gone. So you're a startup, but you're a 110-year-old startup. Can you describe the opportunities and challenges, and how you as a CEO, things you've had to do in order to, make it work?
Sure. And it's a really important opportunity and challenge, as you point out, because the things that we really want to communicate, and I guess that's where I'd start, is you have to be really crisp about communicating the things that we're going to bring along on the journey with us, and the things that we're going to leave behind, right? So we're bringing along the things that serve us on the journey, things like the assets that make us unique, the parts of the culture that serve us, that make us unique. And then we're going to leave behind the things that don't serve us, like parts of the culture that we're maybe family oriented. And what I mean by that are things that were maybe not modern, things, parts of the culture that maybe didn't help us become leading edge, didn't help us build a moat. And so by, this 110-year-old startup concept is we're bringing along the things that serve us to create competitive advantage and help build the moat. And we get to choose those. And then we're leaving behind the things that don't serve us. So it's an opportunity to have really deep relationships with clients that we've had for decades. And, when you look at the assets that we have, they've been in market for literally 70 years. If you look at our ag asset, iron solutions or iron guides, it's been market leading for 70, 80 years. If you look at EDA, that's 40 to 50 years. And you can go down the line. We've been relevant and important to our clients for more than half a century with most of these assets. That's crucial. You don't have any startup that has market relevant data and assets that are more than half a century old. However, we also now have an artificial intelligence platform with 50-year-old client relationships and a brand that we can actually say is relevant and important in each one of these vital infrastructure industries. So it's a great opportunity for us to bring along the things that matter, to leave behind the things that don't matter, and to have a lot of momentum and energy around doing that, because that's what makes it fun, is you get to kind of pick and choose the things that help you get better, help build that competitive moat, and then leave behind the things that were holding us back.
No, I love that, the competitive moat, and leave behind what doesn't work, take what does, and there is a tremendous amount of asset value in what has been built, over all of those years. But this leads me to my next question, which is, so, and I think for the CEOs listening to this podcast who are managing legacy businesses, who are trying to move into becoming a data first business, what are the biggest differences you've noticed from being you're now a data first company with media solutions, and you before were a media company that had some data to offer? What's the difference?
Well, I think the difference is in how we interact. There's a number of things. I think starting with the market back, how we interact with our clients has to be different, right? How clients experience us in terms of insight and outcomes. When you're primarily media, people experience you as content. They experience you as a place to go. Maybe you're relevant, maybe you're important, maybe you're interesting. But when you're data, you're crucial to their operations, right? Like, just as an example, we have assets like our ag asset. If you need to make a trade and you're a big OEM in the ag space or construction, you have to have the asset that we have to make sure that you make that trade correctly so you don't lose money. It's not optional. If you're in the media business, there are some properties you want to go to get relevant information. But if you miss it for a day, if you're traveling or you forget to bring your laptop or your iPad, well, I'll read that when I get back. But if you're in the ag space and you're taking a trade on a $500,000 combine, you have to look at our asset to make sure you don't lose money. So I would say that's the first difference, is being relevant around impact to the business, to the client's business, and to be in their workflow. That's a pivot that we had to make. And that's a pivot that we're continuing to focus on. Being relevant and being outcome oriented versus being interesting and being available. So that's the first thing. Second thing is how we talk to ourselves about the business that we're in. And that's solution selling. That's making sure that we're asking questions about what are you doing with the data, understanding clients' businesses better rather than selling data by the pound, as one of our leaders likes to talk about it. We're actually talking about solving bigger problems, configuring our data and our digital powered data business so that we can actually help clients solve problems and make more money. When you're in the media business, that's certainly an opportunity, but that's a mandate for us now. So those are a couple of ways that we're making that pivot.
Oh, those are two huge things. I always talk about this with media and any type of information service company. If you were not embedded into the daily flow of work and a critical must, I can't do my job without you, that is when you do have some significant threat right now. It's not you can't be a like to have, or we can look at you when we want. So that is that's huge. And the second one, I love this, getting away from selling data by the pound. It's how are you using the data and helping guide them in ways they could use the data, better. Like you're learning so much from your other customers, and it's like it's like software, right? Like you're a subscriber to, you've licenses to software, and the rule is 20% gets used, 80% gets wasted. It's still a strategic,
Mm-hmm.
they still have all this great stuff you can do. The successful software companies are actually showing you, here's how you're able to utilize all of these other features, and then you have longer, better lifetime value. It's the same approach, it sounds like to me.
Yep, that's right. In fact, Heather, our leader of client success, Chris Gertzma, is really putting a lot of work in with her team to upgrade the skill set that we have to reach into our clients, which also helps reduce churn. So there's definitely a big win for us. But to figure out, are we talking to the right people? Are they accessing our clients? We have technology that we're using to see how they're interacting with our products to make sure that they're getting the value out of it, because we want them to get the max value out of it. And we were not really that good about that a few years ago, but now we're doing a much better job so that when they, when they have their license and their subscription, it allows us to do a better job cross-selling and upselling, but also fundamentally it makes sure that what they're using, the clients are using the thing that they signed up for and getting the value out of it. And we're showing them all the features and functionality so that they're actually, it drives a lot of client sat, it drives our NPS scores up. And so that client success function actually is really crucial for us, and we're getting better at it. And I think that's a big investment that we're making, but we're seeing a lot of ROI from it.
The customer success function, as I
Mhm.
could, that's one of my little soapbox rants. Is there, these are not project managers or execution artists. These have to
Nope.
be value creators. And even if you just translate what you just said, which is your customer success leader is saying, I want us to find now just who we're selling to, but who's
Mhm.
using it, and finding out if they're getting value. Imagine if we just like turned the script on that and it was like, okay, years ago, like, why don't we talk to all the people who we're, delivering leads to, instead of the person who's buying at the marketer, and find out, was it valuable? What did you like about it? Did it work? Like, if we had taken that approach a long time ago, there probably would have been a little bit more identification into how we could improve getting to bottom of a funnel for them.
Yep.
Um, all right. So let's move over to a really important topic. And I hear this a lot with, the CEOs that we talk to, and you and I've touched on it. And this is challenging, especially if you're a private equity owned business, which is this transformation you're making, and these are huge investments in data, in people, platforms, and cultural change. And there's a lot of education and expectation setting that needs to take place at the board level. Like, tell me how you're managing that.
Yep. So this was a topic that, I spent a lot of time sort of warming them up, explaining the journey. And frankly, you have to establish credibility beforehand before you kind of undertake this sort of thing, because this is a little bit of an opportunity to go play in involuntary golf if you get it wrong. You get a lot of free time if you screw this up. So you kind of warm them up. You make sure that you have the credibility in advance, and then you start delivering on this in chunks, right? So what is this? I'll just back up a little bit. So we're in probably the seventh inning of this journey in terms of taking our separate data factories. So we think about the assets that we have as data factories, right? And then we have our digital business, which is essentially a factory or a product in itself.
Mhm.
We're combining these into one single data layer so that our clients can get better access to all the functionality. And if you think of like when you log on to Netflix at home, you get access to all of the channels that they have. You think about them as channels, all the content with one login, right? You don't have to subscribe to different channels to get all the content. You have one login and you get everything.
Yep.
This is what we're doing for our clients so that they can unbundle all of the stuff that we have. And I can talk a little bit more in detail about what that is in a minute. But the point of it is that that's a pretty significant undertaking from a technology standpoint, a lot of opportunity to screw it up, but we execute really well. But you have to have a really clear plan, and you have to be able to communicate that plan. And there's also a financial requirement as well. But what we did was we did a pilot. We did a pilot with an investment, and I made a commitment that we would have significant ROI. We actually got 10 times ROI. So we spent money on it, but based on the pilot that we sold, we actually sold 10 times the revenue of the investment. So it was a huge home run. It was a credit to our sales team, credit to our leadership and our engineering leadership. And so the board said, okay, this kind of works, which we knew it would, but the leadership that we have on the ground actually made it work. And so now we have momentum, we have credibility, we, making sure that we have the right steering committee in place. And it's not just sort of this unmanaged parade that we've got running around the company. We actually have steering committee. We've got it, quarterly, monthly, biweekly, and we have been pretty clearly on track. We've had a couple of rakes that we've stepped on because you're not going to go through something like this without stepping on rakes. But I think also importantly, culturally, it's okay to make mistakes here. We have to set the tone in the organization that when you make a mistake, let's talk about it, be accountable, and fix it. Had we had a different culture here, I think this would have been a lot more difficult. You encounter different organizations where when somebody makes a mistake, they hide it and you don't find out about it till later. And that's a very expensive mistake to clean up. I would hesitate to really do something like this in that kind of an environment, because when you step on a rake in that place, you don't find out about it till it's too late, and then it's way too expensive to clean up. So I think the cultural environment in which you do something like this matters a lot too.
Yeah, but you also brought up something very important too, in that you took a pilot approach. I have seen this so many times, big shiny coin at the end of this rainbow without any understanding of the steps that need to take. But we're going to do that. Big promises made, huge millions of dollars spent, only to get halfway to the coin over here to find out like, oh my gosh, all those hidden mistakes or poor assumptions. But it was too long. It was too enterprise wide, right? It was too big, which is where the risk comes in. You mitigated it not only by having the right culture, but you also the pilot approach, which in turn was a massive win, because not only was risk mitigated, you actually had a 10x return on what you really promised. So I think we're all incredible.
And it was also important too, because that's how we made sure that we made the right partner choice, because we're doing this with a third party. And it was commercially part of the strategy too, to say, look, you can be the implementation partner depending on how this pilot goes, which is not necessarily mind-blowing and new, but we said, look, this is what we're going to do. We're going to do a pilot. If this pilot works, we'll roll it out, because there was another part of it where we want to automate the ingestion of some of this data. And that was also part of the second pilot that we're running right now, with the overall goal of fully automating the ingestion and the processing of all of our data assets so that we can be hands off, and then have all of our people, our human capital, spend time figuring out what else we can monetize, and then spend time with clients. And that's ultimately the vision to get to that end state.
No, that's great. And actually with that, I'm sure people are saying, tell us more about this product. Can you without, letting too much information out that would compromise it, but can you talk about what this project was, the pilot, and give a little more detail about what you were doing with the data? And
Sure. So we have multiple data assets, and again, we're in the construction, trucking, ag, and transportation spaces. And with this pilot, we took several, but not all of our assets, and we said, let's go ahead and put them into this integrated data layer. And before, so the old version of ourselves, we would put data into our data engine, and we would take multiple assets and ship it to a client and say, here's a bunch of insight. You figure out what it means. And it was unique. It was market leading. And people would say, this is great. Thank you. I'm going to go spend 38 man hours figuring out what the insights are. For example, we have a very large client who's in the equipment space. They're in the business of selling agriculture and construction equipment from large OEMs that you can imagine would make agriculture and construction equipment. And they want to find new customers, right? So where are the customers? When do these pieces of equipment come off lease? Who should they go sell to? So they want lists of people who are about to have a combine, a tractor, a backhoe. When are they going to come off lease? So their salespeople can contact them and say, hey, I see your backhoe is about to be off lease. We would love to sell you a new one. Here's a program, that sort of thing. So that's just at a high level how you can use our data just for one specific use case, just to keep it simple. Well, that's a lot of work. to get to some really unique insight. But with our pilot, what would have taken 30 plus man hours, we actually built an engine with a natural language processing piece up front to where they could type in, I want to go find people with this kind of equipment who bought it from somebody that's not me. And instead of 38 hours, in less than 30 seconds, we gave them that insight. So almost like a Google search. Instead of shipping them files, they can just log in and get this information in 30 seconds, not 30 hours. And so that's the kind of power of that's the power of this integrated data layer that we've built. And that was just with a couple of our assets. What we're doing now is scaling that up to all of our assets. And so that means that we're basically unpacking the power of combined data and digital. And our chief data officer, Matthew Cox, talks about accelerating the time to value, because it's really a lot of what this is that we're accelerating the time to value. Clients can get value faster, but we're also creating more value because there's so much insight packed into this data that by hand you can get out a certain number of leads in this case, but the machine can get out a lot more. I'll give you another example. There's a huge tire OEM that makes tires. You probably have tires on your car that might come from this manufacturer. They're a big client of ours, and they wanted to know where they could go sell certain configurations of tires to people who have different kinds of equipment, because we know where all the equipment, different configurations of equipment are because of the data set that we have. Well, we had people run through the data set, multiple data sets, and they came up with, let's say, tens of thousands of leads for them. And so we put it through this engine that we built and came up with millions of leads because the machine was able to combine data sets quicker. And instead of tens of hours, it took less than a minute. So that's the same data set, but now instead of people having to build pivot tables and spreadsheets, that's what you get with the AI. So that's an example of where we were able to accelerate the time to value, but also get more out of the same pile of data.
Wow. I probably shouldn't say this, but boy, do I wish you were on the board of Thomas a while ago. This is amazing. Okay. All right. So the internally, and it sounds like you've kind of answered this a little bit, but the talent management issue, right? It's another topic that comes up. It's you brought people over from you probably had a sense, by the way, who to bring, but you still hire people. Like, how do you because you kind of I always say one weak link in the chain can many times derail the entire project, right? And everyone needs to have the same mindset or aligned to what the mission and the vision is, right? And the urgency level has to be on par. What happens when and you're rapidly growing? Like, how are you managing this issue, and are you finding that you still have people that aren't getting on the bus, and how do you deal with that?
Yep. So it's an important topic because this is the most important part of our business is the people, right, and the intellectual capital that lives in between our ears here. I mean, this is actually the most important thing that we worry about is how do we harness the intellectual capital that we have and the energy of our people? Because I would say for the most part, people are really excited about where we're going. There are some people who are still figuring out, hey, what does this mean for my job? And in fact, we have this team that we built recently called the Culture Team, and it's a collection of some folks from all levels of the organization, and we get them together periodically. We did an employee engagement survey, and the purpose of the team is to help us interpret things like, hey, what are we really hearing in the engagement survey? What are you hearing on the ground? They meet with myself and the leadership team, and one of the members of the culture team actually said, hey, we really appreciate these town hall things, but you have to really realize that what people ask you, no matter what they're asking you, they're really asking you, what does this mean for my job? And I was like, oh yeah, that actually makes sense. So through that lens, for the most part, people are really fired up about where we're going. Most of the people I think will make it. Some people sort of worry about their individual skill sets. And I think that's sort of real for some people, but I think the limiting factor is going to be whether people actually want to come on this journey or not, because it's not for everybody. And I think as a leader, you just have to be ready for the fact that this is not about cost. We're not doing this because we have to reduce costs. In our particular business, we're doing really well. We're growing quite nicely. This is not a thing that we're being forced to do. We're doing this because it's the right thing, and it's frankly created a ton of opportunity for our clients. But you just have to know that not everybody's going to come with you on the journey. And as I tell our team, the message isn't for everyone. The message is for who it's for, and that's for people that want to be here.
No, that's really important, because it kind of goes back to the 110-year-old startup, right? It's not business as usual. It is a startup mentality and environment. It's get things done well and quickly and learn as you go. It's abilities building. And if you're on the team and you're worried about the job, maybe like one of the characteristics I would think you look for is, great, but what's your self-directed learning path to help you gain the skills you need, as much as what we're providing?
Yeah. So we have an academy that we've built. It was the Randall Reilly Academy. Now we call it the Fusable Academy, but it's basically a leadership development program. And we put people through it. And the goal is to help people develop skills and capabilities if they're, whether you're a new leader or you've been in your role for a while. And, we're trying to train people and develop people so that they can adapt to a new environment, whether it's things like consultative selling or leading a team. And not everybody is comfortable doing that, right? Not everybody wants to go and get in front of a client and have that kind of a conversation. That's fine. I mean, there's lots of great places to be, but the reality is the vast majority of people are pretty excited about it. And we want everyone to come with us on the journey, but you just have to realize not everyone will.
Absolutely. And that leads me to a question of, on the revenue side, the sales side. So you've got a revenue team, as I like to call it, that is selling. They're still selling media, correct?
So our digital business.
Yeah.
Yes.
Are they two different teams? Are they the same team?
No. So we have so there's two divisions in our company today. So we have our asset intelligence division and our risk intelligence division. Today, there are two sales teams focused on, so risk focuses on the financial services ecosystem, like insurance companies, for example. And then the asset intelligence division focuses on, most of the core market. And those teams sell there's not much overlap at all. And they sell all of the offerings into those channels.
Wow. Okay. So the division is really about the customer segment. And right. But if I'm on the core markets, I go to a client and I'm saying, what do you need? Like I'm doing all my discovery, and I could be selling them the data solution. I could sell them marketing services. I could sell them it's everything.
Yeah.
Offer.
It's, in fact, I was at a trade show last week, as an example. It's it's an insurance industry trade show looking at fintech effectively, and we had a number of meetings with clients. And 2 years ago, it would have been all about how much data can I sell you, how much risk data about the insurability of your fleet and the risk profile of your fleet or of your equipment. But all the discussions we had this year were about how much, what do you need to know about your fleet? We can actually combine all of our data, and we don't even really talk about the brands anymore. We talk about what problems are you trying to solve. We can actually help you solve them. And we're almost brand agnostic at this point, whether, we have brands called EDA and Iron Solutions, RigDig, CAP. And at this point, we're trying to uncover, what are you trying to accomplish? And some configuration of our digital solutions and data can help you get there. And that's what we want to bring to them, because that's ultimately more powerful. And that's why we're making the pivot that we're making, because that's more powerful for them and frankly, more financially beneficial for us to cross-sell.
Well, I think it's also incredible for the client. The client has one point of contact at your business.
Yeah.
Help them solve all their problems versus all of these people trying to call it. It's a lot of media companies don't get that. It's too many people calling this person actually reduces wallet share. So, and I imagine that also filters down to the customer success approach. It's one client gets one customer success team or person, so that they're really dealing with a very agile, fluid revenue team within your business.
That's right. And based on the segmentation work that we've done recently, we're trying to make sure that the largest clients get the most attention. Our middle market, where we have a ton of growth opportunity, will get the right level of attention. And then our smaller long tail will get self-service, and we're building the technology for them to self-serve. Because in the past, I think we were a little bit upside down, where everybody sort of got the same level of service, which is a way to really lose quickly. And so now we're segmenting and doing a lot better job of, the large potential clients are getting the right level of attention and care. The medium, which is where there's a lot of growth, will get focus. And then the small and medium will be self-serve.
You're bringing a lot of like SaaS unit level economics into the business. And it's very hard to get legacy media companies to think like that, but you're looking at it from, customer profitability by segment. And I imagine you're also looking at customer profitability by customer.
Right. Well, the concepts travel. I mean, they apply. And I think people can get caught up on like, well, my electrons are different than your electrons, so I can't think about it that way. And I don't think that matters, really. I mean, the customer is a customer, and it's service, and you have humans and I have humans, and how do we deploy them to try to generate EBITDA? It's all EBITDA and free cash flow. And it's just a matter of how you deploy your people to generate growth and EBITDA, right?
Well, yeah, speaking of that, how do you see, like, if you imagine part of the decision-making process to when, to have Fusable be its own launch, to, split the business, had to do with company valuation and the opportunity.
Mm-hmm. It did. I mean, that was definitely a huge driver of it. It wasn't 100% of it, but it was a huge driver of it. It was, I would say, the first level decision point was the talent business wasn't really getting any investment, because if you had a dollar and you had a profile like we have, you'd say, well, let's just put that dollar in Fusable. And the talent, because they, both businesses reported to me before, and Scott Miller, who runs the talent business, was like, hey, I can't do any M&A because you guys are always stealing all the money. So now they can do M&A, they can invest, they actually generate their own cash flow. And it is, you're right, it's a different profile. It's a great business, it's just a different profile. Yeah. So it just had to do with, once you separate them, now you can generate your own investment profile. Secondly, it's focus, right? So now we can focus on the things that we're trying to do, and you're not thinking about, like, this management team is not thinking about, hey, I wonder when the freight market volumes are going to come back, because you have to, if that's part of your business, right? You have to worry about all of the things that you're responsible for. And when you're not responsible for that anymore, you don't have to worry about that anymore. So it's about focus as much as it was about the investment profile. And then, since we are private equity backed, then you definitely, as a leadership team, have to worry about enterprise value. What are the things that create enterprise value from an accretion standpoint? And then you get into things like, okay, how are we going to generate free cash flow growth, EBITDA growth? What are the trade-offs that we make? And how do we make sure that each incremental investment is accretive to us? And so value creation is a pretty important part of the thing that we talk about.
No, absolutely. And we're coming up to the end of this, and I'm just trying to figure out what question do I put in here?
I've got some more time, so I'm not too stressed about it.
So with that, one of the things I also hear, I'm sure you hear when you go to these events, is there is this fear on some of the part of the, some of these legacy media companies that the investment feels huge. It feels very scary, very huge. But to me, if they don't do it, who cares if, like, you're not going to have an investment to make later. How do you see the industry panning out right now? Like, who's going to be on the side of the winners? And
no, so I've heard that, and I've had that discussion before. So I would think about it maybe a different way. What is the price of not doing it? And why not make it a little bit bite-sized in terms of doing a pilot, constraining the investment so that you can see results, and then decide how did that pilot go? And if we did that at full scale, what would I get for that at full scale? Because you don't have to do it. Like I think we talked about the pilot before. You don't have to do the whole thing at once. In fact, I think if somebody tries to do an implementation like we're doing all at once without doing a pilot, I'd be like, what are you doing? Like, don't do that. So, because there's a whole bunch of experimentation that I think you should do around which asset are you going to work with, which segment, do you know what partner you're going to select? Do you have people on the team in place in advance? I mean, we didn't talk about that, but that's important too, right? This is not for the faint of heart. You should have people in advance, like recruit them if you don't have them. So this is not something that you just go do if you haven't done it before. You do a pilot, have people that are on board in advance, because it's transformational, and that's not like just a word. That's something that takes time, but it's absolutely worthwhile.
That point you just brought up there, and yeah, I agree. Even if it's a pilot, I see this issue is my title is I'm in charge of data, right? I have a title that somehow is related to data or
Yeah.
digital. All of a sudden, that person becomes the lead on this. Yet maybe this person segued into that or got promoted into that title from a legacy mindset, not this new one, and
Yeah.
they're actually put into a huge position to fail. But it's they're not able to say that right away. That I've seen this so many
Yeah.
times. Or the head of audience, insights or data. It's the wrong person leading the charge, and
Oh yeah. No, in fact, that would be a great thing to top the list of what not to do, because the head of audience leading this without the CEO leading this is like a disaster, because the CEO has to lead this kind of thing, anything like this,
Mhm.
because you own it. Because you're gonna guess what? You're gonna be the one with the target on your back anyway if it doesn't go well. So just lead it. Like you can put them in charge to, hey, here's the work plan. We're going to meet every week, or we're going to talk every 3 days. But you fundamentally have to be the one that leads it, because there's just too much at stake, and people are going to look to you, especially the board. So don't delegate it too much.
Yeah. So here's this might be a loaded question here for the CEOs out there, and again, I know a lot of them who are not like they've been leading for a long time. They don't have the data savviness that you do, and you're like it should be led by the CEO. What's your advice?
Um, let me just ask a clarifying question. You mean are people are trying to do something transformational and they just are not ready yet?
No, it's more that I'm a CEO of a company. Let's say I'm a $300 million legacy B2B meeting company. I know I need to transform. It's urgent. I can't increase my valuation unless I get my data in order, and I have to start doing these data initiatives. But I, as a CEO, I'm an old school CEO, right? I know media. I
Mm-hmm.
know events. I don't
Yep.
know this data thing, but I am the CEO of this company.
Yeah, that's a tough one, because I think what you're saying is people get to a point in their careers where they know when they know it's time to maybe move on, or know when they know it's time to get help, or to raise their hand and say, I'm at an inflection point personally. And I don't, I know this is like a generic conversation, but I'm at an inflection point personally. I'm smart enough to know I need help, whether that's hiring somebody for a role and saying, okay, person, I'm going to still lead this company, but I'm going to rely on you. Because this is the hard part here. In jobs like this, you have to have really good proxies. What I mean by that is, when I don't know whether something is, I'm going to use a CFO example. When I don't know if something is appropriate to put below the line, I have to trust that my CFO can say, yeah, we can put this below the line, because I don't know all of the FASB guidelines or whatever. If somebody doesn't know what to do and they hire a proxy for this thing, they better trust that person, because if they don't know and that person gets it wrong, then they're screwed.
Mm-hmm.
Having good proxies is so crucial in this job, like people that you can trust, because if you don't know the content and they're wrong, that's tough.
Yep. Okay. Uh, that's a tough issue. A lot of self-reflection, I would think, for some of those CEOs out there.
Yeah.
Um, so you're a leader in the data space, and one of the topics we're going to talk about at RevvedUP, among others, but the one I think may bring a lot of debate is the issue of data ethics, privacy concerns, especially as it
Mhm.
relates to like the purchase intent coming from first party. What do you see as the things that concern you and keep you up at night, or things you're like, you know what, these are keeping people up at night, but actually it's a non-issue.
Mhm. So, so privacy is always near the top of the list around things that we get concerned about. But we have a very tight program, so we have a great security leader, and so he does a great job, and so we spend a lot of time focusing on that. The thing that concerns me, and it's not because it happens, but when other people use AI or tools that can scale really quickly,
Mm-hmm.
if they get a hold of our data and then they put some kind of tool on top of that, I worry that like where is it going to go in the wild? So I know that we have really good controls and we have really good GDPR awareness around how that evolves, and we're not really exposed to anything that would put us at risk. But that's it's the thing about when your kids learn how to drive. It's like, I'm not worried about you, I'm worried about the other drivers. It's a little bit like that. Like I worry about if a client were to get a hold of data and they build something that is not quite responsible, where does that go? That's the thing that I worry about.
So you brought up something interesting here as well. So for companies doing this, it's not that you only need the data science, data skill set and leader.
Mm-hmm.
You need a security officer, right? You need someone who gets the security issue. But I
Mm-hmm.
imagine your legal side, you also need some expertise there on this.
Yes, we have. Yeah, so we have a security leader, and he's got a team. It's a small team, but he's got a team, and we run pen tests. We have a whole protocol. We have, annually we do our own assessment. He constantly has phishing, things that he sends out to the company, quite comically sometimes, but he does a great job. So we're actively doing our own self assessments, and I think that as in the media space and the data space, it's super critical that you're doing this. And I'm assuming most companies are already doing this, or maybe that's not a good assumption to make. But when you then get into automation and creating a data layer where now you have everything in one place, you then have to have a next level kind of awareness of it, because
Mhm.
it's one thing when it's fragmented, but when you put everything together, now you have scale, and once somebody pierces that veil, things can get out of hand.
Yep, absolutely. All right. So just I have two final questions, and a couple phones at the end. But if you had any advice right now, if it was like the number one thing, and again, I'm sure there's a list of 50, but to a CEO who's running a legacy business, who's moving into a data business, got the skill set, got the mindset, but is like, hey, what's the one piece of advice you would give me as I launch on this journey? What would it be?
Um, Bring clients with you quickly. Do it with clients, because I think the use cases that you can invent in your mind make a ton of sense to you, but make sure that your sales teams are with clients and saying, hey, what about this? What if we could do that? What if we could unpack this asset and deliver it this way? What if we had an API? What if we're going to, like, whatever use case you're thinking about right now makes a ton of sense to you. Um, but remember that Blockbuster did not want to buy Netflix twice, and they told them to pack sand, and they're not in business. anymore. So just make sure that whatever it is you're thinking about, you're relentlessly focusing on how are we going to monetize this and doing it with clients so that it's not just like a really cool idea that somebody has in a conference room.
I couldn't agree more. And you're one of our, headline speakers at RevvedUP, February 25th through the 27th, and you'll be speaking, but you'll also be participating. Is there anything that you're really looking, forward to in terms of an outcome from your participation?
Yeah, learning from everybody else. I mean, we at Fusable, because we'll have, I think, one or two other people there too. Is we always want to learn from other people. We don't know everything. As I'm constantly reminded. So just that, getting out and talking to people and sharing what we're doing. We've made a whole bunch of progress. We've made mistakes, and I think you learn a lot from the rakes that you step on too. So I think that's primarily, what I'm looking for is, learning, getting to know what other people are up to, and then sharing some of the things that are going well and some of the stuff that didn't.
Right. No, that's perfect. Share and learn. All right. So I've got a few rapid fire and then we're going to wrap it up. What's your biggest pet peeve in the business world?
Oh, wow. When people do things at home and they don't do them at work, like you adopt technology really quickly at home and then you come to work and resist it relentlessly. I hate that.
Okay.
Like you adopt all the technology at home and then come to work and nobody wants to use your ERP or,
Oh,
you know what I mean? Like I'm a change adopter in my iPhone and all my personal technology, but I do not want to change anything at work.
there
It
you
drives
go.
me nuts.
Excuses. If you weren't in data and in media and tech, what career would you have pursued?
Oh boy. I don't know. I like to cook. Maybe I'd cook stuff for a living.
All right, you be the cook, I'll be the DJ while you're cooking, and
Okay.
we'll have a food party. All right, and my last question is, what's your favorite book on leadership?
Um, well, there's a whole bunch. So I think I would do a coin flip between Greg Brenneman wrote a book called Right Away and All at Once, which I think is a great read. And then there's another book called Deep Survival, which was written a little while ago by a guy named, I think Lawrence Gonzalez was his name, but he wrote it to try to figure out why certain people, when put in these extreme situations, why some people survive and some people die. Like there are two people lost on a mountain and one person figures out how to live and the other person like goes left and freezes to death. Like it's a really fascinating book. It has a lot of really good analogs to complex leadership situations and running a company and even just being an individual contributor. So those are two really good books.
No, sounds fascinating. Well, thank you for joining us. This was a really, really insightful conversation, Matt, and we're excited to have you at RevvedUP. So, anyone who's listening, if you're a CEO or C-suite leader and you'd like to find out more about RevvedUP, please go to h2klabs.com/RevvedUp with two V's. And Matt, just finally, if anyone wants to get in touch with you, how should they do so?
Well, obviously through you, Heather, or send me an email or a text or reach out on LinkedIn.
Perfect. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Heather. Appreciate you having me.